Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Get ready to dive into something truly epic today because we remashing up two of the most brutal universes ever conceived. Kratos from God of War and the grim darkness of Warhammer 40,000. You heard that right? Imagine the Ghost of Sparta, fueled by pure rage, landing in a world dominated by chaos. Today, we're exploring the hypothetical, yet absolutely insane beginning of this crossover. So, picture this. The warp, that swirling nightmare dimension of psychic energy and raw emotion in Warhammer 40K is usually a place where sanity goes to die. But something different is happening. From its chaotic depths, above the hellish demon-infested world of Varkan Prime, a storm tears open. Not just any storm, but a cataclysmic rift, writhing with unholy lightning and screams that echo across reality itself. It's a tear in the fabric of space and time, unlike anything even the most veteran Inquisitor has ever witnessed. And through this apocalyptic gateway, descends a figure. Not a demon prince, not a legendary space marine, but something far more ancient, far more primal. A warrior, encased in the searing heat of arcane fire, bound by chains that glow with an otherworldly power. It's Kratos, the Ghost of Sparta, ripped from his own reality, perhaps by a twist of fate, a desperate whim of the fates, or the malevolent will of some unknown cosmic entity. He's an anomaly, a being of pure, unadulterated fury, now hurled into a galaxy where war is eternal. And gods are very, very real, and very, very terrifying. He slams into the surface of Varkan Prime with the force of a small asteroid impact. The ground cracks, molten rock sprays, and the air shimmers with residual energy. Demon legions, who were in the middle of their endless, grotesque revelries, pause. Even the most horrific creatures bred from the warp's darkest corners feel a tremor of unease. They sense a presence, an immense power that is not their own, yet resonates with a destructive force they understand all too well. Kratos, battered but unbroken, slowly rises from the crater he's created. The chains that once bound him in his previous struggles now seem like extensions of his very being, still radiating heat and a faint, hellish glow. His eyes, typically burning with a cold fury, now hold a primal confusion, slowly giving way to a familiar, owl-consuming rage. This isn't his world. These aren't his monsters, but they are monsters. And Kratos has a very particular way of dealing with monsters. Varkan Prime is a world steeped in corruption. The air itself chokes with the scent of blood, brimstone, and despair. Twisted flora, grotesque, fauna, and cities built from bone and fear dominate the landscape. This is a playground for the dark gods, a testament to their malevolent power. But their dominion is about to be challenged by a force they never anticipated. As Kratos takes in his new surroundings, the screaming skies, the grotesque structures, the endless hordes of demons beginning to stir and converge on his location, a familiar feeling washes over him. It's the fury, the incandescent, all-consuming anger that has driven him through countless battles against gods, titans, and mythical beasts. It ignites within him, not just as a destructive force, but as a burning desire for survival, for understanding, and perhaps for vengeance against whatever brought him here. His rage isn't just an emotion, it's a weapon. And on Varkan Prime, a world steeped in the raw emotions of the warp, Kratos' anger begins to resonate. It doesn't just fuel him. It actively disturbs the spiritual equilibrium of the planet. Demons, creatures born of emotion, recoil and snarl. Some are drawn to it, like moths to a flame, sensing a kindred spirit of destruction. Others, the more cunning ones, sense an alien, uncontrollable force that could unravel their carefully constructed nightmare. This isn't just Kratos landing on a new planet. It's Kratos' rage awakening a planet's worth of nightmares. The very ground beneath him seems to pulse, the warp energies around Varkan Prime intensifying. Lesser demons shriek and scatter, while greater demons, sensing a significant challenge, Beshintamub, Khorne's bloodletters, might see him as a worthy champion of slaughter. Tzizinch's horrors might twist and turn, trying to comprehend this new variable. Nurgle's plague-bearers might find his sheer vitality an affront. And Slanish's demonet, well, they might find his raw power alluring in their own twisted way. The first wave of demonic entities, a cacophony of teeth, claws, and unholy weapons, surges towards Kratos. These are not the well-ordered legions of Olympus, nor the cunning beasts of Norse mythology. These are horrors born of pure chaos, seemingly endless in number and grotesque in their design. Yet Kratos stands firm, his chest heaving, his eyes fixed on the approaching tide. With a roar that shakes the very air, he slams his blades of chaos. Or perhaps the Leviathan axe if he steel lilts it into the corrupted ground, sending a shockwave that disintegrates the first rank of demons. The chains, still hot, snap and crackle, tearing through flesh and bone as he begins his relentless assault. This is the moment. The Ghost of Sparta, a force of nature, has arrived in the 41st millennium, and the galaxy will never be the same. He's a lone wolf, an unstoppable engine of destruction, dropped into a universe that thrives on war and suffering. What will he do? Can he even comprehend the scale of this new conflict? Will he seek to return home, or will he carve a bloody path through the forces of chaos, inadvertently becoming a weapon against them, or perhaps even a dark champion? The possibilities are endless, and utterly terrifying for the inhabitants of this grim darkness. This is just the beginning, folks. The very first chapter of what would surely be an unforgettable saga. Kratos, the ultimate anti-hero against the legions of chaos. What do you think would happen next? Would he ally with the Imperium, perhaps unknowingly, or would he declare war on everyone and everything in his path? Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we delve deeper into a crossover that has ignited the imaginations of fans across two monumental universes. What if Kratos, the Ghost of Sparta, the god of war, found himself not in the 9 realms of Norse mythology, but in the grim, dark future of the 41st millennium? In our last chapter, we saw Kratos arrive, a silent, ash-covered enigma in a world consumed by perpetual war. Today, we explore his first bloody encounter with the denizens of this new reality, specifically the fanatical followers of the blood god. The arrival of a being like Kratos does not go unnoticed in the warp-twisted landscapes of the 41st millennium. To the countless chaos cults scrabbling for power and favor, such a figure is not a man, but an omen. They see his ash-white skin, a permanent reminder of his past sins, and misinterpret it as a mark of divine significance. They see the raw, untamed fury simmering beneath his stoic exterior, a fury that has toppled pantheons, and they see a reflection of their own bloodthirsty deity. In their twisted dogma, they find a name for him: the lost son of Khorne. A demigod of slaughter returned to lead them to a glorious, blood-soaked victory. They believe he is a gift, a chosen champion sent by the Lord of Skulls himself. Imagine the scene. Hordes of crazed cultists, their bodies adorned with jagged metal and the 8-pointed star of chaos, swarm the site of Kratos' arrival. They're a motley crew of fanatics, their eyes wide with zealous fire. They don't see a weary warrior seeking peace. They see a divine instrument of their god's will. They prostrate themselves, chanting praises in their guttural tongue, hailing his appearance as a sign of the end times, a promise of a new age of carnage. They're not afraid of him. In their madness, they revere him. Their leaders, the towering and grotesque warpsmith priests, stride forward. These are monstrous figures, their flesh fused with demonic machinery, their voices a discordant symphony of grinding gears and staticist sermons. They drag Kratos from the crater of his arrival, not with the intent of capture, but with the reverence one might show a holy relic. They haul him through the frozen Estrum plains, a land eerily reminiscent of the home he lost. The procession leads to a makeshift altar, a horrific monument of skulls and scavenged metal dedicated to Khorne. Here, amidst the chanting and the stench of blood, the warpsmiths begin their sermon. They speak of the glory of slaughter, of the ecstasy of taking a life for the blood god. They preach of honor found in bloodshed, of skulls offered to a throne of bone. They promise him power, a legion to command, and an eternity of glorious combat in the name of Khorne. They demand his allegiance, expecting this lost son to roar his acceptance and lead their holy crusade. They are essentially asking a man who has spent lifetimes trying to escape the cycle of violence to become its ultimate champion. Kratos listens. His face, a mask of stone, betrays nothing. He has heard sermons like this before, from different gods and different lands, all promising power, all demanding servitude. He has seen firsthand what happens to those who pledge themselves to such beings. He looks at the crazed faces in the crowd, the bloodlust in their eyes, and he sees the same blind fanaticism that led to the destruction of his homeland, the death of his family. He sees Ares. He sees Zeus. He sees Odin. The names and faces change, but the lust for power, the insatiable hunger for control and worship, remains the same. The warpsmiths finish their proclamation, their metal claws gesturing towards the bloody icon of their god, waiting for Kratos to kneel, to pledge his axe and his rage to their cause. There is a moment of profound silence, broken only by the whistling wind and the crackle of demonic energies. Kratos' gaze remains fixed on the warpsmith priest before him. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. His entire life has been a response to demands like these. Slowly, deliberately, he reaches behind his back. The air around him grows cold, impossibly so. A faint blue light begins to emanate from his hand as he grips the worn, familiar handle of his weapon. The cultists watch, their chanting faltering, a flicker of confusion in their eyes. Is this part of the ritual? Is their new messiah about to offer a demonstration of his power? They are about to get their demonstration, but it will not be the one they expect. With a motion too fast for the mortal eye to follow, Kratos answers their sermon. The Leviathan axe whistles through the frigid air, not in a gesture of fealty, but of defiance. The air crackles with the cry of frost magic as the axe cleaves through the nearest warpsmith. There is no glorious spray of blood for the blood god. Instead, the priest's superheated, demonic flesh and corrupted machinery flash freeze on contact. A look of utter shock crystallizes on its face as its body shatters into 1,000 pieces of frozen gore and twisted metal. The warpsmith's sermon ends in a tinkling chime of ice. For a second, the entire cult is frozen in disbelief. This was not in their prophecies. Their lost son had just struck down one of Khorne's chosen. That moment of stunned silence is Kratos' opening. He recalls the axe to his hand with a thought, its return journey carving a frozen path through another two cultists who are too slow to react. The rage he has kept chained for so long, the familiar, cold fury, is now unleashed. But this is not the blind, berserker rage of his youth. This is the focused, efficient wrath of a seasoned general and a weary father. Every swing of the Leviathan axe is a masterpiece of destruction. Every throw is a calculated strike. He moves through the cultist horde, not like a man, but like a force of nature, an avalanche of death and ice. He is a whirlwind of cold fury in a world that worships fire and blood. The cult's fanaticism quickly turns to terror. Their chants of praise become screams of agony. They'd prayed for a god of slaughter, and their prayers were answered, just not in the way they had hoped. Their crude chainswords and autoguns are useless against him. Blades shatter against his skin, and bullets ricochet harmlessly off his shield. He wades through them, the guardian shield expanding to block a hail of fire before contracting to smash a cultist's skull. He's relentless, tireless, a one-man army against a horde that thought him their savior. The blood they so desperately wanted to spill for their god now freezes in the gray ash at their feet, steaming as the unnatural cold of the axe meets the corrupted warmth of their bodies. The remaining warpsmiths, realizing their catastrophic miscalculation, try to rally their broken flock while unleashing their own demonic weaponry. Tendrils of warp-fused machinery lash out at Kratos, and cannons forged in hellfire roar to life, but it is futile. Kratos has fought gods and titans. These machine priests are nothing more than a momentary obstacle. He ducks under a plasma blast, the heat washing over his back, and hurls the Leviathan axe. It spins end over end, embedding itself deep in the chest of a warpsmith, its freezing magic silencing the demon engine that serves as its heart. He charges another, shield first. the impact sending the monstrosity flying backward into its own terrified followers. The battle, if it can even be called that, is short and brutal. The cult dies screaming, their blood and limbs freezing to the ground, creating a grotesque, crystalline monument to their folly. The Ultramarine is desecrated, not by a rival god, but by the sheer, cold indifference of a man who wants nothing to do with gods of any kind. As the last cultist falls, silence once again descends upon the ash-covered plains. Kratos stands alone amidst the frozen carnage, the steam rising from his body in the unnatural cold. He retrieves his axe, the frost receding slightly as he places it on his back. He looks at the carnage, not with triumph, but with a familiar, soul-crushing weariness. He came to this world seeking an end to his war, a place to be left alone. Instead, he has found only a new, more twisted pantheon, and followers just as fanatical as those he left behind. His war, it seems, is far from over. He turns his back on the frozen field of slaughter and continues his journey, a solitary, silent figure walking into the heart of a galaxy that knows only war. And that's where we'll leave it for today. Kratos has made his violent introduction to the 41st millennium and declared his non-allegiance in the clearest way possible. But an act of such magnitude will not go unnoticed. What happens when the greater powers of chaos, or even the Imperium of man, learn of this ash-white warrior who defies the gods and slays their followers with an axe of impossible cold? Today, we're diving headfirst into a truly epic crossover that you absolutely won't want to miss. We're talking Kratos, the Ghost of Sparta, stepping into the Grimdark universe of Warhammer 40,000. You thought his battles were brutal before. Just wait until he meets the forces of chaos. Get ready, because things are about to get seriously intense. Imagine this. Kratos, having carved his bloody path through countless realms, finds himself in a new, even more unforgiving landscape. The air is thick with the scent of ozone and war, the sky a bruised purple, and the ground beneath his feet is scarred by millennia of conflict. He stands, a solitary, grim figure, his Leviathan axe and blades of chaos, humming with latent power, a stark contrast to the twisted, industrial ruins that stretch to the horizon. He's seen gods and monsters, but nothing quite like what's about to appear. From that very horizon, a terrifying symphony begins to swell. It's the deep, guttural roar of engines, growing louder with every passing second, shaking the very ground. These aren't just any engines. They belong to the Iron Warriors. Yes, you heard that right. The legendary siege-breaking, utterly ruthless Chaos Space Marines. They're formidable war machines, grotesque fusions of steel and demon, churn through the desolate landscape, kicking up dust and debris like an approaching storm. This is a legion forged in bitterness and betrayal, dedicated to the dark gods. And they see Kratos not as an enemy to be feared, but as a weapon to be claimed. They descend upon him like a plague of steel and hatred. Chaos Space Marines, their power armor corrupted and adorned with the marks of their dark patrons, disembark from their rhinos and land raiders. Their bolters, massive and menacing, are already spitting explosive shells, painting the ground around Kratos with lines of superheated plasma and shrapnel. Any normal mortal, or even most Space Marines, would be instantly annihilated by such a devastating barrage. But Kratos isn't just anyone. He meets their bolter fire head-on, a living tempest against a storm of lead. He doesn't flinch, he doesn't retreat. Instead, he charges with a primal roar that echoes across the ravaged plains. Kratos becomes a blur of raw, unadulterated fury. The Leviathan axe sings through the air, deflecting bolt shells with impossible precision, sending them ricocheting back into the ranks of the Iron Warriors. He's a whirlwind of destruction, moving with a speed that defies his massive build, an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object, and proving it can, in fact, move. The ground around him becomes a graveyard of mangled power armor and twisted metal. One Iron Warrior, emboldened by the whispers of chaos, attempts to engage him in close combat, swinging a massive chain. Kratos, with a swift, brutal parry, disarms the Space Marine, then brings the Leviathan axe down with bone-shattering force. cleaving through ceramitan flesh as if it were paper. The Iron Warrior, a hulking demigod of war in his own right, is reduced to a broken heap in mere seconds. Kratos then turns his attention to their demon machines, the twisted vehicles and constructs animated by dark packs. A predator tank, its cannon roaring, aims directly at him. Without hesitation, Kratos throws his axe. It spins, end over end, a gleaming projectile of frost-imbued malisa, slamming into the tank's gun barrel with such force that it rips the weapon clean off, sending it skittering across the ground in a shower of sparks. Before the crew can react, he recalls the axe, then leaps onto the tank itself, tearing through its armored hull with his bare hands, ripping out its corrupted engine core with a snarl. The Iron Warriors, for all their hardened nihilism and millennia of warfare, are stunned. They've faced countless foes, eradicated entire systems. Yet this single being, Tis outsider, is tearing apart their formations, their revered war machines, with a savagery that rivals their own demonine-fused brethren. Their initial contempt turns to a mixture of fear and something darker all. They realize Kratos isn't just a powerful warrior. He's a being of immense, almost divine potential. And it's not just the Iron Warriors who are taking notice. Far beyond the immediate conflict, in the twisting labyrinth of the warp, the very fabric of reality shudders. The gods of chaos, Gorne, Nurgle, Siench, stir in their slumber, their insidious whispers beginning to permeate the battlefield, slithering into the minds of the Chaos Space Marines, and even, subtly, brushing against Kratos himself. They see his rage, his strength, his defiance, and they whisper his name. They see in him a champion, a potential avatar of pure, unbridled destruction. They sense a soul capable of wielding power beyond mortal comprehension, a soul ripe for corruption, ready to be molded into a weapon for their eternal game. The air thickens with unseen energies as their influence grows. The Iron Warriors, sensing the attention of their dark masters, redouble their efforts, now seeing Kratos not just as a weapon to be captured, but as a prize, a potential champion to be inducted into their pantheon of suffering. Their attacks become even more frenzied, infused with newfound, unholy strength. But Kratos, ever the defiant one, only roars louder, his fury burning brighter with each challenge. He's faced manipulative gods before, and he's not about to become a pawn in anyone else's game, especially not some unseen, cosmic horrors. He grabs a fallen Iron Warrior by the leg, using him as a gruesome club to bat aside incoming bolts, then hurls the lifeless body into a charging group of Marines, scattering them like rag dolls. The blades of chaos erupt in a fiery arc, incinerating anything in their path, their chains wrapping around a dreadnought, allowing Kratos to scale its massive form and plunge his blades into its weakened joints, bringing the hulking war machine crashing down in a shower of sparks and groaning metal. The battle rages, a testament to Kratos' indomitable will against the endless tide of chaos. This isn't just a fight, it's a declaration. Kratos, Ysere, and the Warhammer 40K universe will never be the same. The gods of chaos may whisper his name, but they haven't faced the Ghost of Sparta when he's truly unleashed. And trust me, you'll want to be here to see what happens next. What do you think Kratos will do when he truly understands the nature of the Chaos Gods? Will he be tempted, or will he simply decide to slaughter them all, just as he did the Olympians? The air on Sycharis crackles, thick not just with the smoke of orbital bombardment, but with something else, something ancient and terrible. Amidst the swirling ash and the crimson glow of corrupted runes, a lone figure walks. This is no space marine, no Imperial guardsman. This is vengeance incarnate, a specter of judgment riding a steed of chrome and bone. The Ghost Riders come to the realm of chaos. He moves through the blasted streets, a phantom against the backdrop of a twisted cathedral dedicated to the dark gods. The Word-bearers, the fanatical sons of Lorgar, turn to face him. Their bolters roar, spitting shells that have laid low heroes and worlds. But against the rider, they are like pebbles tossed into an inferno. The rounds melts before impact, splashing into harmless slag against an unseen, unbreakable will. They knew fire. They, who had set 1,000 worlds ablaze in the name of their Primarch, who reveled in the warp's Imperium flames. They were wrong. The fire that wreathes the rider is different. It is cold, it is absolute, and it carries the weight of every innocent life they ever took. It is hellfire, and it has come for them. The first word, Bera, a hulking chosen clad in scripture-etched plate, charges forward, his accursed Crozius crackling with dark energy. He swings, a blow that could shatter a tank, but the rider does not flinch. He simply raises a hand, wreathed in that same chilling flame. The Crozius strikes his palm, and the word-bearer freezes. His eyes, once filled with zealous hatred, now widen in pure, unadulterated terror. Ese es, ito not in his mind, but in his very soul. He sees the face of the first civilian he executed on Calth. He feels the terror of the child whose parents he every sin, every act of betrayal, every whispered prayer to the ruinous powers that damned another soul. It all comes rushing back, not as a memory, but as a fresh, agonizing reality. His armor glows, not from the outside, but from within. The flames are not burning his flesh. They are burning his guilt. His screams are a symphony of damnation, a sound that cuts through the din of battle. The other word-bearers watch, their fanaticism faltering for the first time in millennia. They see their brother's soul being unmade, scoured clean by a fire born of pure justice. The chosen collapses, a hollow suit of ceramite, his spirit utterly consumed, leaving nothing but an echoing scream in the warp. The Ghost Rider lowers his hand, his skull-like face, a mask of unfeeling retribution, pans across the legionaries. There is no anger, no hatred. There is only the calm, inexorable certainty of a debt being paid. He is not a warrior seeking victory. He is a force of nature, an equation of cosmic balance, finally being solved. A dark apostle, his voice a booming catechism of heresy, begins to chant. He invokes the names of his dark patrons, calling upon the raw power of the Imperium to smite this intruder. The ground shakes, the air tears open, and a wave of pure chaos energy, a tsunami of madness and mutation, surges toward the rider. It is the very essence of the warp, a power that has twisted reality and broken the minds of Primarchs, and the Ghost Rider walks right into it. The hellfire that surrounds him erupts, meeting the tide of corruption not as a shield, but as a countercurrent. Where the two forces meet, reality itself grows. The warp is the sea of souls, the accumulation of every thought, emotion, and action. And the rider's fire is the ultimate judgment upon those actions. It is a targeted, focused purity that the sprawling, anarchic chaos of the warp cannot comprehend. The dark apostle's chant falters econ fil italiano. The rider is not just resisting the warp, he is burning it. The raw power he called upon is being turned back, purified, cauterized. The demonic whispers that have been his constant companions for 10,000 years fall silent, replaced by a singular, piercing scream. The scream of the warp itself, as it feels a pain it has never known. It is the pain of absolution, a sensation so alien, so antithetical to its nature, that it recoils in agony. The wave of chaos energy dissipates, cleansed. The Dark Apostle stands exposed, his faith shattered. He stares at the rider, and in the empty sockets of that burning skull, he sees his own damnation. He sees the truth he has always denied, that his gods are not gods at all, but parasites, and he, their most devout servant, is nothing but a fool. The rider points a single, skeletal finger. A chain, glowing with the same righteous heat, snakes out from his side. It is not just a physical weapon. Each link is forged from a broken oath, each one a promise of retribution. The chain wraps around the apostle, not constricting his body, but his soul. The word-bearers are trapped. To run is to admit fear, a concept their twisted pride cannot accept. To fight is to face a power that does not care for their strength, their numbers, or their faith. It cares only for the weight of their sins, and their sins are heavy indeed. The Ghost Rider continues his walk. He is not just fighting a legion, he is a judgment upon an entire ideology. Every step he takes is a refutation of Lorgar's heresy. Every soul he cleanses is a prayer to the good emperor that was never answered, now fulfilled by this impossible angel of vengeance. The fire of guilt is a contagion. As one word-bearer falls, his psychic death scream broadcasts his torment to his brothers. They begin to feel it, the phantom pains of their own crimes, the ghosts of their past rising to haunt them. The Hellfire revelation spreads. The heretics are not merely being killed, they are being shown the truth. Their holy war is a lie. Their devotion is a sickness. Their strength is a fraud. In the heart of their own corrupted world, surrounded by the icons of their faith, they are being subjected to a final, brutal sermon, preached not in words, but in purifying flame. The sky over Sycharis, already a malevolent red, seems to weep tears of blood. The ground, soaked in the malice of a traitor legion, begins to crack and crumble, unable to bear the sheer, unyielding justice of the spirit of vengeance. Hell has come to the hellish, and the devils are learning what it truly means to burn. The battlefield was a symphony of slaughter, and Kratos was its conductor. Each swing of the Leviathan axe sent cultists reeling, their heretical screams swallowed by the biting frost of the weapon. The blades of chaos followed, a fiery dance of death, searing through flesh and bone, painting the corrupted ground in shades of crimson. He was a force of nature, an unstoppable whirlwind of pure, unadulterated rage. He fought not for glory, not for any emperor, but simply because they were in his way. The air crackled with profane energy, the very soil groaning under the weight of chaos. But Kratos was an older, more primal storm. Just as the last of the immediate horde fell, their bodies littering the ground like broken toys, the heavens themselves tore open. They weren't ships, not in any conventional sense. They were metal coffins, screaming through the atmosphere like meteors on a collision course with destiny. They slammed into the earth with titanic force, shaking the very foundations of the world. The ground buckled, and from the dust and debris, metal doors hissed open, venting steam into the blood-soaked air. From these drop pods emerged giants, not gods, not titans, but something in between. They were clad in armor of brilliant cobalt blue, adorned with symbols of eagles and omega sigils. Each one stood over 7 feet tall, their presence a palpable weight on the battlefield. They were the Emperor's Angels of Death, the 13th Legion, the Sons of Gillimandia. Their armored boots crunched on bone and rock as they deployed, forming a disciplined firing line. Their helmets, with glowing red-eye lenses, scanned the carnage. Their leader, a captain with a gilded helmet and a flowing crimson cloak, stepped forward. His name was Aurelius Cassian, and in his centuries of service, he had seen horrors that would break lesser men. He had witnessed demons tear reality asunder and faced Xenos abominations of every conceivable shape, but he had never seen anything like the warrior standing before him. This lone figure, covered in ash-white skin and marked with red tattoos, radiated a power that felt ancient and terrifyingly divine. His weapons an axe that shimmered with impossible cold and chained blades that still smoked with hellfire defied any imperial classification. Was this a manifestation of the warp, a new and terrible strain of mutant, or a miracle? The sheer destructive power this man had unleashed upon the Emperor's enemies was undeniable. He had done the work of a full company of Astartes, single-handedly. The Space Marines raised their bolters, heavy, brutal weapons designed to shred armor and flesh. The sound of dozens of them being primed was like the growl of a predator. Kratos torned his golden eyes, filled with the weariness of ages and the fire of 1,000 battles, fixed on the newcomers. He saw not saviors, but more obstacles, more soldiers, more pawns, in some cosmic game he wanted no part of. He tightened his grip on the Leviathan axe, its frosty aura intensifying. The blades of chaos on his back smoldered, eager for another taste of battle. He cared not for their flags or their golden idols. He only understood the language of combat. Captain Cassian's voice boomed through his helmet's external voxcaster, a sound of synthesized authority. In the name of the Emperor, identify yourself, unknown combatant. Lay down your arms and submit for judgment. His words were iron, backed by the threat of overwhelming firepower. He saw the way the stranger looked at them not with fear, but with a cold, challenging glare. It was the look of a being who had faced gods and triumphed. Kratos gave no answer. Words were a currency he rarely spent. Instead, he let his actions speak for him. He took a single, defiant step forward. It was a challenge, a clear and unambiguous statement. That was all the Ultramarines needed. The order was given. Open fire. A torrent of explosive bolts erupted from the Ultramarine line. Each shell was a miniature rocket, designed to penetrate and detonate within its target. The air filled with thunder and smoke as the storm of righteousness descended upon the Ghost of Sparta. But Kratos was no stranger to overwhelming odds. With a roar that seemed to shake the very stars, he moved. He was a blur of motion, his guardian shield manifesting on his arm just in time to deflect the first volley. Explosions blossomed against the ethereal barrier, the force of the detonations staggering even him. He charged, not away from the gunfire, but directly into it. He weaved through the explosive patterns, a feat of speed and agility that should have been impossible for a man of his size. The ground churned around him as bolter shells missed their mark, creating craters in the blighted earth. One shell found its mark, striking his shoulder. It detonated with a sharp crack, enough to tear a normal man in two. Kratos grunted, stumbling for a moment, the golden ichor of his divine nature weeping from the wound before it began to slowly seal. He was upon them in an instant. The Leviathan axe met a space marine. Shane swerved. In a shower of sparks and a screech of protesting metal, the worried teeth of the Imperial weapon bit at the ancient axe, but could find no purchase. With a powerful shove, Kratos broke the bind and brought the pommel of his axe around, cracking it against the Ultramarine's helmet with enough force to shatter the ceramite and send the giant stumbling back. The blades of chaos were next. They lashed out like fiery serpents, wrapping around the leg of another Kratos yanked, pulling the 7-foot giant off his feet and crashing him into his battle brothers, disrupting their disciplined formation. The battle became a chaotic melee. Bolters were useless at this range. It was now a contest of steel, strength, and conviction. Captain Cassian met Kratos head-on, his master-crafted power sword humming with a crackling energy field. The weapon could shear through tank armor, but Kratos met its every strike. Axe, blade, and sword clashed in a furious ballet of death. "You fight with the strength of a Primarch," Cassian grunted, his own superhuman strength tested to its absolute limit. "But you fight without faith, without purpose. You are nothing but a wild beast. I have had enough of gods and the men who serve them." Kratos growled back, his voice a low rumble of gravel and ancient fury. He parried a powerful downswing and countered with a shield bash that sent a visible shockwave through the captain's armor, forcing him back a step. But as they fought, the true enemy began to stir once more. From the shadows and ruined structures, a new wave of cultists swarmed, their numbers bolstered by grotesque, mutated beasts' chaos spawn, their flesh roiling with unnatural energies. A roar echoed from the distance, a sound that promised damnation. A greater demon was coming. The cacophony of the larger battle forced a moment of clarity. Kratos and Cassian broke apart, their chests heaving. They looked at each other, then at the tide of filth and corruption that threatened to overwhelm them both. They were enemies. Yes, one a holy warrior of a gilded god-emperor, the other a godslayer who wanted only to be left alone. Their ideologies were worlds apart, their very existence an affront to the other's reality. But survival was a universal language. The roar of the approaching demon grew louder, a promise of a pain far greater than anything they could inflict on each other. Captain Cassian looked at the strange, white-skinned warrior. He saw the raw power, the untamed fury. It was heretical. It was dangerous. But right now, it was also necessary. He gave a curt nod, a gesture of grudging respect and battlefield pragmatism. "The enemy of my emperor is my enemy," he stated through the vox. "We will finish this later. For now, we have a common foe." Kratos glanced at the approaching horde, then back at the blue-clad giant. He didn't care about emperors or enemies. He only saw a path forward, and that path was currently blocked by a sea of monsters. He spat a glob of golden ichor onto the ground and lifted his axe. "Fine," he grunted. "Stay out of my way." An uneasy truce was forged, not in words, but in the shared understanding of impending battle. The god of war and the angels of death turned side by side to face the tide of chaos. The real war was about to begin. This is going to be insane. What do you think will happen when the greater demon arrives? Let me know in the comments below. The air in the grand chamber was thick with the scent of sanctified incense and stale fear, chanting, a low, guttural drone of high, Gothic litanies echoed off the vaulted stone ceiling, the words of purity and judgment weaving a suffocating net around the solitary figure in the center of the room. Kratos stood there, shackled, his massive frame a stark contrast to the robed figures that encircled him. Their faces were hidden in the deep shadows of their cowls, but their condemnation was a palpable force. "Abomination," one voice hissed, the sound like dry leaves skittering across flagstones. "Heretic," another spat, the word laced with venomous certainty. "Demiurge," a third accused, the title a profanity in this sacred space. They were the voices of the Inquisition, the self-proclaimed arbiters of faith, and he was their latest prize. Kratos' eyes, chips of obsidian in a weathered face, scanned the tribunal. He saw not judges, but vultures, circling what they perceived as they saw his unnatural strength, his defiance in the face of their authority, and labeled it heresy. They couldn't comprehend a power that wasn't granted by their emperor, so they feared it. And what the Inquisition fears, it seeks to destroy. He remained silent. Words were useless here. Their minds were closed, sealed tight with dogma and righteous fury. They had already passed their sentence. This trial was mere theater, a performance for their own grim satisfaction. The chains on his wrists felt less like restraints and more like a challenge. He could have shattered them, could have turned this solemn chamber into a charnel house. Bade Whitehead. Something else was coming. He could feel it, a subtle wrongness slithering at the edges of reality, a presence far fouler than the sanctimonious hypocrisy surrounding him. The lead inquisitor, seated on a hubacked throne of groaning iron and bone, raised a skeletal hand. The chanting ceased, replaced by an oppressive silence. "Kratos." The Inquisitor's voice was amplified by some hidden voxcaster, raspy and ancient. "You stand accused of consorting with the unholy, of harboring powers beyond the grace of the God Emperor, of being a blight upon the soul of mankind. You are a cancer in the body of the Imperium. How do you plead?" Kratos finally lifted his head, his gaze locking with the glowing lenses of the Inquisitor's mask. He offered no plea, no denial, no confession. His silence was his answer, an act of defiance more potent than any word. A frustrated murmur rippled through the robed figures. The Inquisitor leaned forward, his throne creaking in protest. "Your silence condemns you, heretic. You will be purged. Your soul will be scoured by the holy flames. Your name erased from all records. You will be." He never finished the sentence. The very air began to curdle. The sanctified incense turned to the stench of sulfur and decay. The flickering candlelight faltered, casting long, distorted shadows that writhed and danced with a natural life. A fissure, a tear in the fabric of reality, sizzled into existence behind the Inquisitor's throne. It was a wound of raw, unfiltered chaos, bleeding purple and green energies into the holy chamber. Panic erupted among the inquisitorial acolytes. The litanies of purity became frantic, panic shouts. The robed figures, so confident in their judgment moments before, now scrambled back, their faith a flimsy shield against the raw horror unfolding before them. From the tear in space, a thing of nightmare began to emerge. It was a symphony of wrongness, a creature of sinew and shadow, with too many limbs and a maw that wept spectral fire. Its claws, long and sharp as obsidian shards, scraped against the stone floor, and a chittering laughter echoed not in the air, but directly in the minds of everyone present a sound that promised an eternity of torment. A demon of the warp, drawn by the potent cocktail of faith, fear, and psychic energy that saturated the chamber. The creature's multifaceted eyes, burning with malevolent intelligence, swiveled and fixed upon the Inquisitor, seeing him as the brightest soul, the most delectable morsel in the room. The Inquisitor, frozen in terror, could only stare as the demon lunged, its claws outstretched to claim its prize. In that instant, as chaos threatened to consume the heart of Imperial justice, Kratos moved. There was no conscious thought, only pure, primal instinct. With a roar that was more beast than man, he shattered the sanctified adamantine chains as if they were made of glass. The sound of their breaking was like a thunderclap, a declaration of intent. He didn't run. He didn't hesitate. He launched himself forward, a blur of motion. The demon, its attention momentarily diverted by this unexpected defiance, turned to face him. It hissed, its psychic laughter turning into a shriek of rage. Kratos ignored the mental assault, his will an unbreakable fortress. As the demon swiped at him with claws that could shear through ceramite, Kratos ducked under the blow, his movement impossibly fluid. He closed the distance in a single heartbeat. There was no weapon in his hand, but his body was a weapon. His fist, clenched tight, became a hammer of righteous fury. He didn't just punch the creature, he channeled every ounce of his mysterious, condemned power into that single, decisive blow. His fist connected with the demon's chest. There was no sound of impact, no satisfying crunch. Instead, a wave of pure, white-hot energy erupted from the point of contact. It was not the fire of the warp, but something else. Something clean and absolute. A light so intense it bleached all color from the room, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. The demon shrieked, a sound of utter agony and disbelief as its physical form, a construct of lies and hate, was unmade. It didn't just die. It was annihilated, its essence scoured from existence by a power it could not comprehend. The light faded, leaving behind smoking after-images on everyone's retinas. The Tyrian reality sealed itself with a final, mournful sigh. The stench of the warp was gone, replaced once more by the scent of incense. In the stunned, absolute silence that followed, all that remained of the demon was a scorch mark on the floor. Kratos stood over it, his chest heaving, his fist still smoking with residual energy. He slowly unclenched his hand, the strange power receding back into him. He turned, his gaze once again sweeping over the tribunal. The robed figures were no longer vultures. They were frightened children, staring at him with a mixture of terror and awe. The lead Inquisitor, who had been seconds from a gruesome death, slowly lowered his hands from his face. He stared at the scorch mark. Tenet Kratos, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. The very heresy he was about to condemn had just saved his life and sanctified his chamber in a way no ritual ever could. His Voxcaster clicked on, but the voice that emerged was not the booming pronouncement of a judge. It was a whisper, filled with a dawning, terrifying revelation. A whisper that carried across the silent chamber. "The Emperor protects," he breathed, his certainty shaken to its very core. Then, his gaze fixed on Kratos, the man, the abomination, the savior, or perhaps, he sends. In that moment, the trial was over, but a far greater and far more dangerous question had just begun. Thank you so much for watching this chapter unfold. If you're as captivated by Kratos' journey as we are, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support means we can keep bringing these stories to life. The void whispered heresies. The stars themselves seemed to bleed, but on the surface of the besieged moon, a new, more primal fury was unleashed. This was Kratos' first true taste of the 41st millennium's endless war. He stood not with gods or titans, but with mortal men and women clad in flak armor, their faith their only shield against the horrors of chaos. This was the Blood Moon Crusade, and the Ghosts of Sparta had found a new, desperate battlefield. The moon, once a thriving imperial outpost, was now a festering wound in the void. Its skies were stained a perpetual, sickly crimson by the warp storm raging nearby. The very ground writhed under the influence of the dark gods. The Imperial God, soldiers drawn from 100 different worlds, fought and died in the muddy, gore-slick trenches. For every cultist they cut down, 10 more seemed to rise from the corrupted earth, their bodies twisted into mockeries of the human form. Even the mighty Space Marines, the Emperor's chosen angels of death, found their advance stalled. Their bolter fire tore through ranks of heretics. Their chainswords reaped a bloody harvest. But the tide of chaos was relentless. a tsunami of madness and mutation, where transhuman warriors faltered. The desperation of the common soldier was palpable. You could see it in their eyes, a mix of terror and grim resolve. They were fighting for their homes, their families, for the very soul of humanity. But they were losing. Into this meat grinder of a stalemate strode Kratos. He carried no lasgun, no bolt pistol. His skin was pale, marked with the crimson tattoo that spoke of a tragic, violent past. In his hands, he wielded the Leviathan axe, its icy edge humming with ancient power, and on his back, the blades of chaos, chained reminders of a life of rage and servitude. The Imperial Guard stared, some in awe, some in fear. Who was this giant, this bare-chested warrior who seemed to have stepped out of ancient Terran myth? He was not a space marine, nor an Ogrin. He was something else entirely, something older and far, far angrier. He didn't wait for orders. He didn't need them. The stench of corruption, the screams of the dying, the sheer, unadulterated madness of Chaoset was a language he understood intimately. He had fought monsters and gods. These were just more obstacles, with a roar that was more beast than man. Kratos charged. The Leviathan axe scythed through the air, freezing cultists solid before shattering them into 1,000 pieces. He threw the axe, and it became a blur of runic steel, cleaving through a line of gibbering horrors before returning to his hand with a thud. Then, the blades of chaos ignited. Twin torrents of fire wrapped around his arms as he became a whirlwind of destruction. He was not a soldier executing a battle plan. He was a natural disaster. The chains on the blades were not just tethers. They were extensions of his will, lashing out like fiery serpents, dragging screaming heretics into his reach. Where Space Marines relied on tactics and overwhelming firepower, Kratos relied on pure, unbridled fury. He tore through chaos-infused beasts with his bare hands, ripped the spines from bellowing mutants, and met the charge of a hulking chaos spawn with a defiant shout, driving his blades deep into its corrupted heart. The tide of the battle turned. The Imperial Guard, inspired by this singular demigod of wrath, found new strength. They surged from their trenches, their battle cries mixing with Kratos' guttural roars. The Space Marines, initially wary of this unknown element, recognized a potent, if savage, ally. They coordinated their volleys, creating firing lanes for Kratos' rampage, their bolters providing a thunderous chorus to his symphony of slaughter. He was a spearhead, a living battering ram, and he broke the back of the Chaos offensive. The Blood Moon, which had been a graveyard for Imperial forces, was slowly being inch by painful inch, through the sheer, violent will of one man. He was not fighting for their emperor. Not yet. He was fighting because this was what he did. He fought monsters, and the forces of chaos were the most monstrous things he had ever encountered. In the aftermath, amidst the cratered landscape and piles of alien and human dead, Kratos stood breathing heavily, his body splattered with ichor and blood. The moon was quiet, save for the crackle of fires and the groans of the wounded. A high-ranking Inquisitor, flanked by stern-faced Kasserkin, approached him. The Inquisitor's gaze was sharp, analytical, trying to comprehend the force of nature he had just witnessed. He began to speak of the God Emperor, of the divine light that guided humanity, of the holy crusade against the darkness. Kratos, who had served and been betrayed by gods his entire life, listened with a stone-faced silence. The concept of a benevolent, all-powerful ruler was one he viewed with deep, ingrained suspicion. He had seen what gods did with power. The Inquisitor, perhaps sensing his skepticism, led him not to a grand cathedral, but to a hidden sanctum deep within the command fortress. There, surrounded by flickering cogitators and chanting tech priests, was a holographic shrine. It depicted a colossal golden throne, and upon it, a skeletal figure enmeshed in a web of ancient technology. Life support tubes snaked into the corpse. Psychic energy arced around its withered skull. This, the Inquisitor explained with a voice heavy with sorrow and reverence, was the God Emperor of mankind. Not a living, breathing deity, but a 10,000-year-old corpse, kept in a state of living death by arcane machinery. His mind, a psychic beacon in the warp, was the only thing protecting humanity from utter damnation. His will, however faint, guided their ships and shielded their souls. Kratos stared at the image. The golden throne, the corpse emperor, a dead god. And in that moment, he finally understood. He looked past the Inquisitor, at the faces of the nearby guardsmen. He saw the same look he had seen in the trenches. A desperate, unwavering devotion. These people weren't fighting for a glorious, living God who walked among them. They were fighting for a memory, for a promise. They were fighting for a dead father whose fading psychic scream was the only lullaby that kept the monsters of the dark at bay. Kratos knew despair. He knew what it was to lose everything, to see your family, your world, turn to ash. He looked at the image of the skeletal emperor, and for the first time, he didn't see a tyrant or a deceiver. He saw a tragedy on a cosmic scale. He understood their faith, born not from prosperity, but from the deepest, darkest abyss of hopelessness. Humanity's gods were dead. Their only hope was a corpse on a throne, and in their desperate, fanatical struggle to protect that last flickering ember, Kratos saw a reflection of his own endless, bloody fight. His purpose here, in this dark and terrible future, was starting to become terrifyingly clear. In the smoldering heart of a world laid waste, where hope had been reduced to whispers carried on ashlit winds, two figures met. One was a god, or what was left of one, a ghost of Sparta cloaked in the pallor of his past. Kratos, the ghost of Sparta, stood as a monument of ruin amidst the ruins themselves. His skin, a canvas of his sins, seemed to drink in the dim, mournful light. The blades of chaos, chained to his flesh and his soul, hung dormant at his hips, their inner fire a low, malevolent ember. He had sought solitude, a quiet end to a life defined by unending war. But the world, it seemed, was not yet finished with him. The other figure approached, not with the clamor of a soldier or the arrogance of a king, but with the measured, silent tread of one who walked hand in hand with inevitability. Her armor was the color of a midnight storm, etched with symbols of an unyielding faith. This was Inquisitor Reborn. Her face, framed by hair as white as bone, was a study in grim determination. Her eyes, however, held no judgment, no fear, no revulsion at the sight of the pale giant before her. They held only a stark, chilling clarity. She had seen the coming darkness, felt its fetid breath on the back of her neck, and knew that conventional weapons and prayers would shatter against it like glass. She stopped a respectful distance from Kratos, her gaze sweeping over him, taking in the sheer, brutal power coiled within his frame. She saw the chains, the scars, the ashes that were his skin, where others saw a monster, a butcher, a godslayer to be feared or destroyed. Reborn saw something else entirely. She saw a force of nature, an instrument of pure, unadulterated finality. "They call you the Ghost of Sparta," she said, her voice not loud, but carrying a weight that cut through the silence. It was not a question. It was an acknowledgement. "They say you are a curse, a walking apocalypse who leaves only graves in his wake." Kratos' eyes, pits of ancient fury and bottomless sorrow, slowly lifted to meet hers. His voice, when it came, was the grinding of stones that had borne the weight of mountains. "What they say is true." He offered no defense, no explanation. His history was not a story to be told, but a burden to be carried. The Inquisitor gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "I have read the scriptures of your world, the chronicles of your rage. I have seen the pantheons you have toppled, the gods you have unmade." She took a step closer, her resolve unshaken. "The faithful in my order would see you as an abomination, a blasphemy, to be purged. They would call you a weapon forged by chaos, to be locked away or broken." A low rumble started in Kratos' chest, the first stirring of a familiar fire. "Then they should try." The challenge was plain, a simple statement of fact. "But I am not them," Rael continued, ignoring the threat. "I do not lead with faith alone. Faith can build cathedrals, but it cannot cauterize a wound that festers to the bone. Faith did not stop the sky from tearing open. Faith will not stop the things that now crawl from its depths." She gestured to the blighted landscape around them, to the twisted trees and the sky that wept an oily, Black rain. Look around you, Spartan. This is the work of corruption, a plague of the soul that turns all it touches to despair and decay. My Inquisition was formed to fight it, to hold the line and restore order. We have fought with prayer, with steel, and with conviction. Her voice hardened, and we are losing. Kratos remained silent, a statue of contemptuous patience. He had heard the pleas of mortals and gods before. They were always a prelude to betrayal, to use, to more death. I have not come to recruit a soldier, the Inquisitor stated, her eyes locking onto his. Soldiers follow orders. They serve a banner. They are shackled by dogma and doctrine. I have not come to offer you salvation or seek your repentance. The gods of this world are as silent as the ones you killed. She took another step, closing the distance until she stood almost before him. The air crackled with the tension between the holy warrior and the god-killer. You are not faith, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet gaining an intensity that was hypnotic. You are fire, pure, untempered, and absolute. And this world has a sickness that must be burned away. Fire must burn what festers. The words hung in the air, resonating with a truth that Kratos understood better than any other. Destruction, cleansing, an end to things that were rotten. It was the only song he had ever truly known. For the first time, someone was not asking him to be a hero, a savior, or a servant. They were not asking him to change what he was. They were asking him to be precisely what he was. He studied her, this woman who spoke of fire to the embodiment of rage. He saw no deceit in her eyes, only the desperate pragmatism of a leader, pushed to the very edge. She was not offering him a leash. She was pointing him toward a hunt. This is not a plea for allegiance, Rael clarified, as if reading his thoughts. It is an alliance. You are a force beyond my command, and I would not be so foolish as to try. But I can direct your path. I can show you the nests where the corruption breeds. I can point you toward the heart of the disease. She unclasped a small, dark metal symbol from her belt, the icon of her Inquisition, a sunburst pierced by a sword. She did not offer it to him. Instead, she set it down on a shattered slab of rock between them. We are not masters and servants. We are not allies in hope. We are a pact. You will be our operative, a scalpel of fire to carve out the rot that our own blades cannot reach. You will hunt for us. You will bring the fire. Kratos looked from the symbol to the Inquisitor. For centuries, he had fought against his nature, had tried to bury the Spartan, the god of war, beneath a shell of weary resignation Ahab filleted. The rage was always there, a beast sleeping fitfully in its cage. This woman was not asking him to unleash it for vengeance or for glory. She was asking him to use it as a tool, a final, terrible solution for a world that had no other options left. His hand, scarred and calloused, moved, not toward the Inquisitor, but toward the blades of chaos at his side. His fingers brushed against the worn leather of the hilts. The chains that bound them to his arms seemed to rattle with a faint, eager hum. He finally spoke, his voice a low, gravelly promise. I am not your servant. I know, Reborn replied, her expression unchanging. I hunt, Kratos declared. It was not an agreement. It was a statement of purpose, newly rekindled. The Inquisitor nodded once. The pact sealed not with oaths or handshakes, but with a shared, terrible understanding. Then let the hunt begin. Kratos reached down, but not for the Inquisitor's symbol. His hands closed around the grips of his blades. Asidro. Then the chains tightened, and the ancient, cursed fire that slept within the metal erupted into life, bathing the ruins in a hellish, orange glow. The ghost of Sparta was no more. The hunter had been reborn, and in the dying light of a corrupted world, the fire was finally ready to burn. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more tales from the edge of darkness. Your support means everything and helps us continue to bring these worlds to life. We'll see you in the next one. The fall of Olympus was not an end. It was a forging, cast into the void between realms. Kratos drifted, a ghost of vengeance in a sea of stars. But the cosmos is never truly empty. He was found, adrift and unconscious, by an Imperial rogue trader vessel, a relic of a bygone age. They saw not a godslayer, but a giant of a man, broken yet radiating an impossible power. They brought him before the High Lords of Terra, before the silent, golden throne. There, in the heart of the Imperium of man, a pact was sealed, not with words, but with a silent understanding. The Inquisitors of the Ordo Malleus, the demon hunters, saw the truth in his soul. They saw the ashes of his family, a pain that mirrored the endless suffering of their own galaxy. They saw the blades of chaos, weapons forged in the fires of a hell they could only begin to comprehend. They saw a weapon, a perfect, self-propelling instrument of righteous fury. They gave him a new purpose, a new war, an eternal hunt. Kratos became the Imperium's shadow, its most secret and terrible executioner. He was unleashed upon the festering corruption that gnawed at the edges of reality. His first target was a demon prince of Slaanesh, a being of exquisite agony and twisted delight that had turned an entire hive city into its personal garden of torment, where legions of godsmen had failed, where even the Grey Knights had been held at bay. Kratos descended alone. The demon prince taunted him, whispering promises of pleasure and an end to his eternal grief. It showed him visions of his daughter, not as she was, but as a blissful servant of the Dark Prince. It was a fatal miscalculation. Kratos had faced gods who played with mortal hearts. This creature was just a parasite. The battle was not long. The blades of chaos, once symbols of his damnation, now became instruments of purification. Their ethereal flames burned not just flesh, but the very essence of the warp spawn. The city was silenced, its perverse symphony replaced by the solitary footsteps of a returning ghost. Next, the Inquisition pointed him toward the Ghoul Stars, to a prophet of Nurgle who had turned a dozen worlds into plague-ridden gardens of decay. This demon, a bloated, jovial monstrosity, saw Kratos not as a threat, but as a potential champion. Embrace the Grandfather's gifts, it gurgled, as legions of plague-bearers shambled forward. Let go of your pain and accept the inevitable cycle of decay and rebirth. Kratos walked through the tide of filth and disease, his Spartan rage a cleansing fire that burned away the corruption. He was a force of nature against a force of stagnation. He tore through the demon's minions, his every strike a denial of its foul philosophy. He stood before the great unclean one, a mountain of muscle and hate against a mountain of flesh and pestilence. He ripped the demon's heart, a pulsating orb of concentrated plague, from its chest and crushed it in his bare hand. The garden of Nurgle withered and died around him. But it wasn't just demons. The Imperium bred its own monsters. In the Segmentum Pacificus, a charismatic preacher had declared herself a living saint, a new messiah for the downtrodden. Billions flocked to her banner, her words promising a new age of peace, a peace that required severing ties with the tyranny of Terra. She performed miracles, healing the sick and blinding her enemies with holy light. The ecclesiarchy was in an uproar, the local authorities powerless. The Inquisition dispatched Kratos. He arrived not as an army, but as a pilgrim. He walked among her followers, listening to their hopes, seeing the false dawn in their eyes. He had seen this before. Hope twisted into a tool of control. He confronted the saint on the steps of a grand cathedral. She radiated power, a golden aura that brought men to their knees. "Behold," she cried to her followers, "the agent of the Corpse Emperor comes to deny you. Paradise, but I am the true voice of the divine." Kratos was unimpressed. He had stood before pantheons. "You are no god," he growled, the words a low rumble of thunder. He raised the Leviathan axe, its frost magic swirling in the humid air. The scent unleashed a torrent of golden light, a force that had incinerated armored tanks. The axe drank it in, the runes glowing with cold fury. He threw it. The axe spun through the air, a comet of ice, an ancient power, and shattered the psychic illusion. The golden light vanished. The saint was revealed for what she was, a powerful, rogue psyker. her face contorted in a snarl of fear and rage. The crowd gasped, their faith crumbling into dust. Her execution was swift, a stark and brutal lesson in the nature of divinity. With every victory, his legend grew in the secret holes of the Inquisition. They gave him a new title, a designation whispered in awe and fear: Oginatus Divinus, the Divine Engine. A living weapon, aimed and fired by the will of the Emperor's most ruthless servants. He was the final solution, the ultimate sanction, the last argument against the horrors of the galaxy. But as his fame grew in the Imperium, so too did his infamy in the warp. The Chaos Gods, those ancient, terrible intelligences, began to take notice. They saw the trail of broken champions, shattered artifacts, and extinguished cults. This was not the work of a mortal, nor an angel of their great rival. This was something else, something older, something angrier. They saw a being who had not just slain gods, but had annihilated their very concept. In the Empyrean, among the thrones of skulls and the gardens of pestilence, they gave him his own name. A curse and a warning. They called him the Bane of Thrones. And so, Kratos continues his hunt, a silent, grim-faced demigod cutting a swath through a galaxy of false gods. He seeks no redemption, no peace, no glory. He is simply the rage at the heart of the storm, the Ghost of Sparta, the divine engine of the Imperium. And for the demons and heretics who would call themselves gods, his arrival is the only true end. Thank you so much for watching. This has been a dive into a crossover I've wanted to explore for ages. What do you think? Which chaos god would be Kratos' ultimate challenge? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into grim darkness, please consider liking the video and subscribing for more. We're just getting started. Until next time, stay vigilant. We're exploring the ultimate, tragic conclusion to the saga of Kratos and Athena, a tale we've titled The Fall of Athena. Imagine this. Olympus is a graveyard of gods, its marble halls shattered and silent. Kratos, having carved his path of vengeance, stands amidst the ruins, a ghost in his own victory. But one echo of the past remains, twisted and horrifying. Athena, the guide, the betrayer, the sister, has not truly vanished. She returns, but not as the goddess of wisdom we once knew. Her essence, her very soul, has become fused with something from beyond the veil of warpenity, a creature of raw, chaotic power. This is not the Athena of Olympus, shimmering in golden light. This is a terrifying new being, a phantom of sorcery and madness. Her form flickering between the divine and the monstrous. Her psychic temple, once a sanctuary of strategy and intellect, is now a crumbling ruin, a reflection of her own fractured mind. It's here, in this spectral wasteland, that she appears before Kratos, not in the flesh, but as a psychic projection, a whisper in the wind. Her voice, once a beacon of guidance, is now a chorus of discordant promises. She speaks of purpose, of a new path for She offers him the one thing she believes he still craves above all else: redemption. Join me, brother, she might plead, her form coalescing into a semblance of her former glory. The world is broken. We can reshape it. We can bring order to this chaos. I can guide you, Kratos. I can give you the peace you have fought so hard to find. This is your final chance for redemption. It's a tempting offer, a siren's call to a man who has lost everything, a man defined by his sins. For a moment, we might wonder if Kratos will finally succumb. But the Kratos who stands before her is not the same man who once sought absolution. He is a being forged in the fires of betrayal and loss, tempered by the ice of an empty throne. He has learned the true costs of divine promises. He has seen firsthand how the gods' guidance leads only to manipulation and ruin. He looks upon this monstrous apparition of his sister, and he sees not a path to redemption, but the final, corrupted chain of his past. He sees the last vestige of Olympus, a pantheon that took his family, his life, and his humanity. Where another might see a chance for salvation, Kratos sees only the final lie, and so he answers her desperate plea, her grand offer, with the most devastating response of all: silence, a profound, unshakable silence that speaks volumes more than any battle cry ever could. It's a silence that says, I am done. It's a silence that rejects her twisted purpose, her false redemption, her entire existence. It is the final, definitive judgment of the Ghost of Sparta. In that silence, Athena's projection wavers. Her confident facade crumbles, revealing the warp entity beneath a being of raw despair and ambition, now facing utter and complete rejection from the one person it sought to control. This is not a battle of blades, but a war of wills, fought in the ruins of a psychic landscape. Kratos reaches out, not with the blades of chaos, but with the sheer force of his indomitable spirit. He isn't just striking a physical form, he's reaching into the very heart of her psychic temple, into the core of her being. His hand closes around her soul, the last spark of the goddess of wisdom, now corrupted and entwined with another worldly parasite. He doesn't just want to defeat her, he wants to erase her. He wants to end the cycle, forever. With a final, silent exertion of will, he crushes her soul. There is no triumphant roar, no explosion of divine light. There is only the quiet fading of a whisper. The psychic temple dissolves into nothingness. The warped entity is banished back to the void from whence it came, and the last echo of Olympus is silenced forever. Athena, the architect of his rise, and the victim of his rage, is gone. Not who's dead, but utterly and completely erased from existence. Her fall isn't a grand, epic battle. It's a quiet, personal execution of a memory, a final, solemn act to close the book on an entire age. Kratos is left standing alone. Truly alone this time. The gods are gone. The whispers are gone. The promises are gone. All that remains is a man, a world in ruin, and a future yet unwritten. This act isn't about vengeance anymore. It's about severance. It's Kratos cutting the final thread that ties him to the gods of Greece, freeing himself not through forgiveness or redemption, but through absolute and total annihilation of his past. The age of Olympus is over, not with a bang, but with the silent crushing of a corrupted soul. He is free. But as he stands in the silence, the question hangs heavy in the air. What does a god of war do when there are no more wars to fight, and no more gods to kill? This, my friends, is where the new saga truly begins. The end of Olympus marks the terrifying, uncertain birth of something new. Across the endless, star-strewn void, a lone figure gazes into the abyss. This is a galaxy shrouded in darkness, where hope is a flickering candle against a hurricane. This is the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, and into this crucible of eternal war, a new, yet ancient, force has arrived. He is the Ghost of Sparta, the god of war. His journey has been one of blood, ash, and vengeance. He has toppled pantheons, slain gods who ruled from lofty mountains, and defied the threads of fate itself. But this new cosmos presents a challenge unlike any he has ever faced. Here, there are no marble temples on sun-kissed peaks. There are only cathedral starships, planet-sized forge worlds, and the unending, ravenous hunger of alien gods. As Kratos drifts through the wreckage of a forgotten fleet, his gaze falls upon the sigil of the Imperium of Manda Aquila. He learns of this galaxy's dominant power, an empire of 1,000,000 worlds, all united in fanatical devotion to a single being, the god emperor of mankind. They tell him of a golden warrior, a psychic marvel who once walked among men, now a silent, enthroned corpse whose psychic light is a beacon against the encroaching darkness. A god, they call him. A savior. Kratos clenches his fists, the leather of his gauntlets creaking in the silence of the void. He has seen this before. A powerful being, bound to a throne, worshipped by the desperate and the fearful. A cage, gilded and grand, but a cage, nonetheless. Even here, he rumbles, his voice a gravelly echo of ancient sorrows. Gods are prisons. They promise salvation, but deliver only chains. But I will free them. I will free them all in fire. His eyes, burning with an unholy light, scan the star charts. He sees the myriad cults and religions that fester across the galaxy. He hears the whispers of the chaos gods, the ruinous powers that dance in the warp. Korn, the Lord of Skulls, whose essence is the very slaughter Kratos once embodied. Sinchi, the weaver of fates, a manipulator whose schemes rivaled those of Athena or Hera. Nurgle, the lord of decay and despair, a perversion of life itself. Anslanus, the prince of excess, a gluttonous void of sensation. Teyar gods. They demand worship, and for that, they must die. Helans of the Aldari, a dying race who birthed a god of their own hubris and now pay the eternal price. Their laughing god, Sigarach, dances through the webway, a jester playing for the soul of his people. He is a god. Is. Atarich. He sees the orcs, a green tide of savagery, fueled by the primal power of their twin gods, Gork and Mork. Brutal and Cunin. They are the very essence of war Teyara gods. They will fall. He even hears the faint, psychic hum of the greater good, a philosophy twisted into a doctrine of forced compliance by the Tau, their ethereals holding the reins of a nascent empire. A false promise, a different kind of chain. Under the watchful, paranoid eye of the Inquisition, a new file is opened, a seal is stamped. The subject, a being of impossible strength and rage, a warrior from beyond the veil of reality, designated only as the Ghost, an anomaly, a threat, an exterminatus in the form of a single man. They haunt him seeking to understand, to contain, or to destroy him. They do not realize they are merely another name on his list. The High Lords of Terra, the Inquisitors who fancy themselves the arbiters of humanity's fate they to play at being gods. And so, Kratos' new odyssey begins. His ship, a captured relic, refitted for a singular purpose, cuts a path through the war-torn sectors. He is not a hero. He is not a savior. He is a Judman. He is the final, bloody answer to the question this galaxy screams into the void. Is there a god who can save us? Kratos' answer is simple. There are no gods. There is only power, and those who abuse it. And he is here to strip that power away. One broken throne, one extinguished star, one dead god at a time. This isn't a war for territory or for faith. This is a hunt, an eternal mission to slay every false god this galaxy dares to worship. The god of Warhammer is not the Emperor, nor is it the four-headed beast of chaos. The god of Warhammer is coming for them all, and he carries an axe. The age of gods is over. The age of Kratos has just begun. Thank you so much for joining us on this epic what-if journey. If you love seeing titans from different universes collide, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. What do you think would happen first? Who would Kratos hunt down initially? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, stay legendary.